Hello everyone, this is Joe. Last video I showed you this raised bed here first, and if you remember, this was covered with weeds. It would seem as though I planted more than I need in this bed, but you see, I not only plant for our consumption, I also consider our poultry, which happen to love greens from my garden. So I purposely would plant extra so that I have something to treat my poultry, my hens with. And so as you can see, I have tomato growing here. I have 4 tomatoes, and right in the middle I have bitter melon. As I come here regularly, I would pull out some of the seedlings and give them to my hens. I will continue to thin them out and feed my hens with them, and naturally I will be saving for my own consumption. I do love my mustard greens, as well as I believe I throw some kales here as well. Okay, so my berries, we decided to go ahead and cover it, and this one, although not as much fruit as it did last year, I don't know, it's not showing very well, but it did put out some fruit right there. So that one did put out some fruits, and that's my goji berry out here. I do have another goji berry plant which is inside the greenhouse, but what I have out here, as you can see, is putting out lots of blooms and berries. Okay, and this bed, you can see that my bitter melon is doing well. How many plants I have here? I have 1, 2, 3, about 5 bitter melons here, and they are starting to bloom, as you can see right there, and starting to put out some bitter melon as well. And in here, this is my sweet 100 cherry tomato, and if you look closer, you can see that there are actually some fruits in there. Okay, so let me look on this side of the zucchini. We have done a little pruning here because these zucchini plants here are getting kind of dense, and oh, look at that. Oh, let me tell you, here goes a nice good zucchini that we managed to hand pollinate right there. It's doing well, and let me tell you that we already were able to do harvest from this zucchini raised bed here. I will give you a shot of that harvest, and I think today, I think there's one more that we could harvest, and I'll show you that when we pick it. So right now everything is really wet. We had a heavy downpour yesterday, starting late yesterday until all night long until early this morning, and it just now got done raining. So everything is really soaking wet, and pardon the mess. My husband is working on something here to create a trellis for my yam right here. So you see this little pot here? I planted one of the zucchini here, and to see how well it's gonna take this little pot. As you know, zucchini, like most of the squash, are heavy feeder, so we want to see how how much can we get out of this little pot from a zucchini. And there's not much soil in there, as you can see, but my husband is going to show you what this zucchini have here for us. Now if I go on this side, I could show you that. Look, that's pretty much a size that you can harvest it, but I'm gonna leave that there and show you what we got today. Let me have that, Daddy. And as you can see, not a bad size at all. And I will also give you the shot of our first zucchini harvest. Okay, I just gotta take a picture of that. As you can see, that's ready for harvest there. It's got ants going in there. Okay, so what I have here, look at that. This is my butternut squash. Unfortunately, oftentimes the female flower blooms before there's any male flower. So what we are going to do is attempt to pollinate this with zucchini. Now I realize this cross-pollinating, and I'm not sure if it's going to work. But several years ago, I remember having planted one side zucchini and the other side spaghetti squash. And as the zucchinis were blooming and bearing fruits, okay, make sure you just use all of that pollen and that one alone. Oops, let me focus right. Okay, so okay, I'll tell you the story later. Let me show you what my husband is doing. This is just an experiment. We had never done this before. Humidity is causing my camera to blur, but I hope that's pollinated. So that's one butternut squash pollinated, and we got another one. So my husband's gonna get another male zucchini flower to do the other squash, butternut squash. So there, you see what my husband is doing is introducing the pollen of the male zucchini flower to the female butternut squash pollen flower right there. So let's hope that that will work, and if it is, we just discover how we could pollinate our vegetables, squash, whatever it might be, early before the male flowers actually bloom. So, okay, let me show you. And if you notice this vine alone, that's 1, 2, 3, that's 3. Oh, and down there, 4 butternut squash. It seems that for every, pardon me, being clumsy here, for every leaf, with every segment of the vine, there's a fruit, as you can see. It's looking very prolific this year. Okay, so let me go back to the story of my zucchini and spaghetti squash. Okay, this same raised bed here, several years ago, I planted one side with spaghetti squash and one side with zucchini. Zucchini started bearing fruits earlier than the spaghetti squash. And when spaghetti squash finally did start bearing fruit, it started with blooming with female and no male spaghetti squash. So I thought that would not be pollinated until the male spaghetti squash bloom. But few days afterwards, I came back to check on my garden. I noticed that the spaghetti squash are getting big. The only difference that I noticed is that instead of the green to almost buff color, the spaghetti squash is actually green like the zucchini color. So I don't know what to make of it. I was not very familiar with the squash cross-pollinating then, so I let it be. And if you look for that video, you will see how big that spaghetti squash grew, looking more like a zucchini from the skin, but when we cooked it, it is pretty much what a spaghetti squash should look like and taste like. So that's how I get the idea of trying to pollinate my butternut squash today with the zucchini flower, male flower that is. Okay, so now my intention is again to give you a tour and update of my garden. Okay, so as you can see, my bottle gourd are also putting out flower. That's a female flower there. I don't know if that had been pollinated because as I said earlier, I have not seen too much bees or much of the pollinating insects yet, but there's a lot of male and female flowers on my bottle gourd, but I just hope that some of it got pollinated, and I might even try to pollinate some of them myself just to secure at least one or two for the time being until hopefully the pollinating insects make it here. Soon as it warms up even more, temperature do come down a little. It gets a little chilly still, so maybe that is the reason why, but I'm hoping that soon they'll be here and be attracted to the blooms. This actually is that there, and this here had two straight eight cucumber, and as you can see, it's in bloom. That's a straight eight cucumber, and again, this is you can see from the female flower there that that's a butternut squash. Here's some more butternut squash in here. That one is the butternut squash that we pollinated earlier, and more female butternut squash. They're looking very prolific this year, but I do hope my pollinating insects comes to visit soon. And here, this also, I have two cucumber here as well, and you can see that it's in bloom. And on the other side of that, you can see all of my tomato that has been planted. I'm gonna go on that side so I can show you what the tomato plants looking like. And that's the zucchini that we picked from one of the zucchini that I have planted inside a container. So on this side of this raised bed, you can see that my tomatoes are doing well. They are also in bloom, and you can see all that. I do a little shaking of the tomato cage to ensure some self-pollinating, as that is the nature of tomato. They self-pollinate and it's not a problem for us. This one makes us feel better knowing that we don't have to worry about any insect to come to pollinate it. And as you can see that my sweet 100 cherry tomatoes are actually putting out fruit. Huh? Well, what do you know? There's actually a baby tomato in there coming out already. So this one is in bloom as well. Okay, so let's go. Okay, let me show you something. Now, here is one of the bottle gourd, and from the look of it, this might have been pollinated. So keep my finger crossed and I will give you an update of that most likely next week, and we'll find out if that one there, which seems to be bigger than the rest of the bottle gourd right there, seems to have been pollinated. And if you look, there's lots of female bottle gourd, and it's just a matter of waiting for the pollinating insect to come and do their job. In this raised bed here, you can see that my eggplant is doing the same thing. It's starting to put out some blooms. Okay, now I'm not worried about this raised bed because, as you can see, it's covered with bird netting, and the only thing I'm making sure I deter from or prevent from coming into this raised bed are the squirrels, because they will come and demolish all of the eggplant. They love eggplant and I also like it too. That's why I plant them. So I want to be able to have some for myself and not just my squirrels or the squirrels in our yard. But my eggplants are in bloom, as you can see. You can see that my daikon radish are starting to put out root. The white, fat white root you see there where the leaves are attached to, that's the daikon radish root. Okay, they're starting to put out some root as well. And on this side of this raised bed, you can see that I do have that, I don't know what type of beans these are, because like I said, I ordered one thing, but when it came to me I noticed that it's not exactly what I think it should be. So we will find out what type of beans this is soon as the fruit comes out. Okay, over here, if you noticed, well, you might not it might not be noticeable, but I was able to harvest a couple of Bok Choy, and I still have some going on in here, which I did not plant a whole lot because heading towards summer, Bok Choy prefers season that is not too hot like the kind of heat we get here down south. So I plant just enough so I could get started with my greens early in the spring season. And when summertime comes, which they'll end up bolting anyway, I most likely would have harvested all of them already. And as this one here as well, this is in about a few days more, I should be able to harvest that as well as that. Okay, don't be alarmed, because it looked like, Joe, you are neglecting your garden again. We are not really, we are doing our best to keep up with the weeds and all, but these are not just your ordinary weeds, okay? These are actually something I planted on purpose, and I harvest from here, from this weird-looking plants here. These are Purslane, and for those of you who know what Purslane is, you know that Purslane is very rich with omega-3 fatty acids. So I harvest this for my salad or my soup, and I give the rest to my chicken. I feed it to my hens to give me omega-3 rich eggs from their diet, which the purslane and other greens in my garden. So as you can see, some things I do on purpose, and it would seem almost as though I'm neglecting this bed again and letting the weed take over, but these are not weeds. We will eventually be harvesting a lot of this purslane here for our own consumption, as well as giving them as treats to our hens. Now let me show you something. Right there is another very healthy type of plant. That is a Malabar spinach. Okay, you see the red coloration? That's what a Malabar spinach look like right now. It's still young, and that as well, I'll harvest some for my own soup or salad, and then I give the rest to my hens. And if you remember, I showed you how that right in the middle of this bed I have some peppers planted in here. I'm not too concerned about the yam. As you can see, they're all coming up. They came up, most of them already, and they're coming out or putting out lots of vines. Chances are they will take over this entire bed, but I'm not worried so much about it choking or taking over the peppers, because we will be training all these vines to climb up. You know, this will be growing vertically. And as a matter of fact, let me show you what my husband is doing. As you can see right there, he's working on the trellis where my yam will be climbing to. This is also a sweet 100 tomato here, and as you can see, it's in bloom. And along this edge, this side of the raised bed, I have planted dandelion. And as you can see from the leaves you can see how you pretty much can tell that this is a dandelion. And I have been harvesting from this. I will show you a picture of the last harvest. I've been picking. This is my early spring greens, are the dandelions. These are two varieties of taros, okay? This taro here grows so much bigger than this taro right there. That is Yautia, and this is Malanga. Both come from a taro root family. So one grows bigger root than the other, okay? And wow, my asparagus is looking really nice this year, and I was so happy that I was able to harvest some asparagus this year. Hopefully I'll be able to harvest more next year. But okay, so here, as you can see, this here, 1, 2, 3 tomatoes. These are my Cherokee purple tomatoes. On this side, you can see my bitter melon. As you can see, doing well. Here goes another one. And let me help this one up. This is what I do with my vining plants. I train them until they find their way up on the trellis. Okay, so we need to secure that with pins. So okay, on this side of the garden, you see that my bitter melon and tomatoes are doing well, as well as those plants, those that are planted in the pots are doing very well. These are the eggplants in this little greenhouse here, and as you can see, they have buds. Actually, it's in bloom as well. You see the flower there, and see that flower there as well. This got a couple of flowers in bloom already, and most of them are blooming. And what we do with this little greenhouse here is we keep it open. This is the opening to give the pollinating insects, if they come to visit, an access to the eggplants inside that little greenhouse. And my comfrey here has been blooming, and because of the heavy downpour last night, you could see that most of the blooms had fallen into the ground. But I believe if I look in there, there are lots of little comfreys growing all around it, which I could go ahead and plant somewhere else, but I'm leaving this comfrey where it's at and just let it propagate itself, continue multiplying until I could make use of it. And over there, those are my peppers planted inside the container as well. They are in bloom. More eggplant in bloom, and peppers are doing well. These are lemongrass, as you can see. And let me go on the other side, show you what it looks like. I have sweet potatoes growing in the container, and I'm really happy. Hey, there she goes. One of the best friend you could ever have come and visit your garden is the ladybug. And I need more than just this one ladybug. But I believe we do have several ladybugs here I've seen before. So that is a good sign. These sweet potatoes are all planted inside a container. You can see there. These are the sweet potatoes. And let me show you what my regular potato look like. My yellow and red potatoes planted in a container as well. Now this is my Italian, or I believe, I don't know, I believe some people call this Italian and some call it Roma green beans. Okay, let's just say this is Italian green beans that I planted on this side, and also blooming, and will soon start putting out some green beans. This is my favorite green beans simply because I found it to be tender and very flavorful. It's stringless and just really The flavor to me is so much sweeter than other green beans I planted before, and I really like the texture, it's tender and stringless. So this is Italian or Roma green beans that you can see. I believe this also comes in bush type, but I like to plant the one, this variety here, which are vine, so that I could plant it vertical, as you can see, going up the trellis. Bush type to me requires a lot more room than what I have in my raised bed.